The pre-sale for badges to the Rose City Comic Con is underway. It's coming to the Oregon Convention Center September 6th through 8th, and this year's lineup is stacked. Hayden Christensen, aka Anakin Skywalker, will be there, so will Rosario Dawson from movies like Death Proof, Sin City, and Men in Black 2, and Simon Pegg from Shaun of the Dead and Hot Fuzz. Freaking Simon Pegg! Plus a ton of cast members from your favorite shows and movies, along with your favorite comic book artists, authors, and so much more. Go buy your badges now at rosecitycomiccon.com. Today on CityCast Portland, we're continuing our look at this fall's sprawling city council race. With 12 seats up for grabs, there are more than 70 people running for office. So we're going district by district, talking with reporters who either live in the neighborhood or are covering that race closely. And our guide for District 4, which covers all of the West Side and Sellwood, is Willamette Week City Hall reporter Sophie Peel. It's Tuesday, July 30th. I'm Claudia Meza, and this is what Portland's talking about. Sophie, the boundaries of District 4 are a bit more unique than other districts. Could you explain what's going on there? Because it encompasses the entire west side, but it also jumps the river to southeast.
Yes, so District 4 is all of Portland west of the Willamette River. But my understanding is that because the west side doesn't have the same population as the other three districts, basically District 4 had to take a little chunk of southeast. And so that's what it does. So, sort of in the south waterfront, if you jump over the river, and there's a couple neighborhoods down there where District 4 sort of carves into them, like just a little rectangle of southeast Portland is part of District 4. And again, that's to balance out the kind of population differences.
So what I've been told about the terms of how long the city council members will be in office is dependent on the voter turnout of that district. And I'm just curious, since District 4 also has Sellwood, if that at all had anything to play, because I know that District 4 is a 2-year term.
Yeah, so District 3, which is the inner southeast district, I think that district has the highest number of registered voters. And then I think second is District 4. And Districts 1 and 2, which are North and Northeast Portland, and then East Portland, those have much lower voter registration and also turnout historically in city elections. And so Districts 4 and 3 only have the 6 people that they're going to be electing to the city council are only going to have 2-year terms. So, that's a lot of work for just a 2-year term. And then we're going to have to elect all 6 again.
I know. I mean, I know they're also doing it to stagger, so it's not like a brand new group of council members every 4 years, basically.
Right. I mean, that's the thing, too, is what's making this fall election is so crazy. I mean, we have over 70 candidates so far that are running for just 12 seats is because we don't have city elections where we elect 12 people. In this one, we're electing 14. We're also electing a mayor and an auditor. It is going to be a wild world in the fall. And so, yeah, the staggering, of course, makes sense. We don't want to have to elect 12 new people every single 4 years. Also, there's really something to be said for having people remain on council that have been there before. If you have 12 new people, which we probably will this fall, there's going to be a lot of growing pains. And I think the crafters of the Charter Commission wanted to avoid a complete overhaul every 4 years. Because change takes time. And so if you have 4 years and then you do a complete 180, it's too much.
Mm-hmm. So what do you think the main priorities of your district are right now?
Yeah, well, I think, as always, it would depend on who you ask. I think looking at how the kind of leading candidates in my district are campaigning, I would say they are really focusing on homelessness, the revitalization of downtown, petty crime to an extent, and then also high taxes. I mean, the West Side District is the richest district, and it's where a lot of the people in Portland who are sort of griping about the high tax burden in Multnomah County and in Portland are, at least threatening, either fleeing or threatening to flee. To move over the border so they can avoid taxes. And so I would say most of the leading candidates in District 4 are pretty moderate candidates, kind of business-friendly candidates, and they are very much talking about lessening the tax burden and bringing back economic development to downtown Portland. And I think I can fairly confidently say this, not that we have fewer problems than any other district. I mean, East Portland has a gun violence problem and also like a real, housing shortage problem. And it's not that District 4 doesn't have those problems at all, but they're not quite as like potent or, I guess deadly. I mean, they're just not as deadly. So we sort of have like first world problems. I mean, I think I would say all of Portland's problems are probably first world problems, but District 4 really has first world problems.
Oh, interesting. Well, I mean, I'm sure that's not how the people who live in downtown feel, though, That's
true. And I will say downtown is the part of District 4 that is just a little bit unlike any other part of the city. It is our economic core, and it has a very specific set of issues that sort of puts the focus of the election in many ways on downtown. I mean, a lot of our big office towers downtown are approaching foreclosure, and we are not getting new tenants in, and big businesses are, fleeing their headquarters from downtown and going to Lake Oswego. I mean, those are really big issues. And you can say what you want about downtown Portland. It shouldn't be the focus of any election, but it is also our economic center. It's part of the reason why we have such a high tax rate and why voters historically have been okay with having such a high tax rate is because we have that economic center that's really like driving wealth in a lot of ways. And so because it's crumbling, that is a real issue, and the city has very much struggled to bring it back online.
Yeah, the whole downtown issue is what I'm most curious about. District 4, because do you think the fact that District 4 has to focus a lot of their concerns about downtown, do you think that's distracting Selwood's concerns about their own area, since that's not where they live?
Right. No, it's interesting that you raised that question. I mean, what I would say is that I think Selwood, yes, it's a Southeast neighborhood, but it's also a fairly well-off neighborhood. And so I think they do have actually quite a few similarities with West Side voters. There are some differences when you cross a river, but I wouldn't say, if District 4 was all of the West Side and then a sliver of a North Portland neighborhood that had, a fairly high rate of gun violence. That to me would feel like too much of a mismatch. But because it's Selwood, which is a pretty affluent neighborhood, it feels fairly actually congruous to me.
Well, let's talk about the candidates. As of right now, there are 18 people registered to run in District 4. And of course, we can't talk through all of them. So we're focusing on the 8 candidates who have reached the threshold to receive matching funds from the city. Since we are looking at District 4 last in our series, it has the most candidates who have reached matching funds, but it's still outpacing other districts. I wonder why, huh, Sophie?
Well, I think it's who knows?
Who knows?
One can only guess.
One can only guess why these candidates have money. Anyhow, well, let's talk about the first candidate, Eli Arnold, who is a bike police officer?
Yes, Eli Arnold is a bike cop with the Portland Police Bureau. And he is, at least my latest understanding, is the only cop that's running. He has qualified for $40,000 in matching taxpayer funds. He's a nice guy when you meet him. He is sort of the image of a good cop, I guess, kind of jolly, and talks a lot about law enforcement and cracking down on crime, but also being, compassionate, quote unquote. And he's received a lot of support from, the business community, and also obviously the police union, I'm sure, is super happy that he's running, because they would, of course, like to have 1/12 representation on the city council. Eli Arnold is one of the few District 4 candidates that actually lives in Selwood. He's got a little family. Then we've got, how I'm sort of looking at this district when I'm looking at people who have qualified for matching funds is we've got 6 pretty moderate candidates and then 2 pretty liberal candidates. And there's kind of not a lot of whole in-betweeners. There's only one person who I would say is sort of straddling that line a little bit. So a couple others that have qualified for matching funds who are kind of on the more moderate side. We've got Olivia Clark, who she's now retired, but she worked for decades in government. She worked for former Governor John Kitzhaber. She worked at several state agencies. Then she went to TriMet. And she's, I think, seen as a very reasonable, kind of steady-handed person, and is pretty well respected, at least in sort of the political and government community. Stan Penkin, he's the president of the Pearl Pearl District Neighborhood Association. He's always been very vocal about, homelessness and wanting to crack down on that. He's kind of spearheaded several efforts in the Pearl District to clean up tents, move tents, get people into housing. That has come with a little bit of controversy because I think there's people who would wonder if they're really doing it in the most efficient and also compassionate way. It sort of straddles that line a little bit.
Another thing about Stanley Penkin that I saw is that he's really into supporting the arts. Like, he served on the board for the Portland Center Stage and Oregon Children's Theater. He co-founded the Oregon Arts and Culture PAC. So he seems like a person who really cares about, the level of like livability within his confines of what that means,
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, well, let's take a quick break here, and when we come back, more candidates running for District 4. There are so many meal kits and food delivery service options out there, but imagine having your own personal chef that does all the planning, shopping, cooking, and even cleaning. They also take your dietary goals and restrictions in mind. Every meal customizable and made fresh to order in your own kitchen. And on top of all that, it's affordable, priced similarly to grabbing takeout. Sounds a little too good to be true, right? Well, Chefs for Senior is doing just that. They're a one-of-a-kind in-home meal preparation service that doesn't just deliver meals, they provide the chef. And it's not just for seniors, they're also serving those recently discharged from the hospital, new parents, and those who would rather just have someone else do the cooking so they can focus on the things they'd rather do. Check it out for yourself at chefsforseniors.com/portland.or. That's chefsforseniors.com/portland.or. All right, so let's talk about Bob Weinstein, and I hope I'm saying his last name correctly.
Yeah, Bob is 73 years old, and for 16 years, he was the mayor of Ketchikan, Alaska. Prior to that, he served on the city council. So he has put in his time as a public servant. Obviously not in Oregon, but in Alaska, which has a lot of challenges, as we all know. He has not run for office in Oregon, and he is retired. But he got really involved during the Charter Commission. And he wasn't involved in kind of the typical sense of being one of the 20 people who actually crafted the new form of government, but he was very involved in the group that tried to kill the ballot measure that voters passed in 2022. And so he sort of linked arms with kind of the business community and with some like city council sort of old timers to kill the ballot measure. Of course, didn't kill it, and now he's running for one of those spots. But yeah, he's a really interesting character, and he is very moderate. He can be some might say a bit of a curmudgeon, but he's sort of one of those curmudgeons that is like a bit of a delightful curmudgeon.
Do you think it's just that he's 73 and people don't, at a certain age, they're just like, ah?
I feel like I'm saying things I shouldn't say.
Oh, Sophie. All right, so let's talk about the next candidate, Tony Morse. He's 42. He lives in Woodstock, another Southeast candidate, very near the District 4 boundary. What do you know about Tony?
Yeah, so his prior job was as the policy director for Oregon Recovers, which is, as many people know, the addiction advocacy group that actually has quite a bit of power in the Oregon legislature. They throw a lot of stones and they actually get results. But for a while, Tony Morse was their policy director. He's a pretty laced up guy. I mean, he's very soft spoken. He is someone who's in recovery. I think prior to being the policy director at Oregon Recovers, he was actually in real estate for a time. It's my understanding that his wife was sort of the breadwinner for the family, and so he could sort of take on a couple passion projects. But yeah, he's very moderate. He talks a lot about, he kind of uses buzzwords like pragmatic and evidence-based. And
I love that these are buzzwords. It's not buzzwords.
They are real words, but they're also buzzwords.
Yeah, I see. Okay, go on.
But that's a lot of the moderate District 4 candidates right now. They're really critical of the Joint Office of Homeless Services and how the county basically has been using their homeless tax dollars to get people into housing or fix kind of the situation on our streets. And so he's been very critical of that, as has a lot of his kind of peers in this district. But yeah, he's doing quite well, and I think he's pretty politically connected because of his work as a policy director.
Yeah, if he wins, I think he needs to use Tony Tone's late 90s hit Feels Good. And if he doesn't, it is a lost opportunity.
Yeah.
Tony Morse, ball is in your court. Well, let's talk about Moses Ross. He's the Multnomah Village Neighborhood Association president. Another association president.
Yeah, there's quite a few in other districts too. I believe there are more neighborhood association presidents, which is really interesting, and I would love to get more into that too. But Moses Ross, he's been involved in sort of the Democratic Party for many years. He lives in Multnomah Village, obviously. I think even before he was president of the neighborhood association, he's just always been very involved in that community. So he is very passionate about, that neighborhood. And he did a lot of negotiation with the city when they put the Safe Rest Village there in the neighborhood. And so he's worked for years on that. He's been very diligent about that. He has some financial problems, though. Last week, Willamette Week reported that just this year actually had been issued $63,000 in federal tax liens, stretching back a decade.
Oh.
So he said it had to do with a bookkeeper that left, and then the pandemic hit. But, it's not great when you're running on a platform of sort of like fiscal responsibility when you owe $63,000 in federal taxes.
Well, especially because he served on the Multnomah County Community Budget Advisory Committee since like 2018. So that's not clicking.
I think voters will bristle at that irony. And also, I think the other thing too, perhaps more important, is that he has qualified for $40,000 in matching taxpayer funds from the city's small donor elections program. So he's getting $40,000 in taxpayer funds for his campaign, and yet he's been issued tax liens just this year for $63,000. And I think that will rub voters the wrong way, at least some of them.
Yeah. Well, the next two candidates, Sophie, you pointed out as being like the only two what you consider progressive candidates who've qualified for matching funds so far in District 4. You want to go through them? I have Mitch Green and Chad Likens. This is the one thing they have in common is they're both 42 years old.
There you go.
According to our Googling.
So Mitch Green is a veteran. He's an energy economist for Bonneville Power. And he is super progressive. He is, we did an entrance interview with him a couple weeks back, and he was really hyper-focused on green energy and also kind of the socialist housing model where the city buys up a bunch of property and funds affordable housing. He is just progressive through and through. I think what makes him kind of interesting is that he's also a veteran, and I don't think people normally think of super progressive politicians as also, serving in the military, and he does have that sort of nuance to him. I mean, I think every candidate has nuances, but I think that could potentially get him a little bit more traction.
He also has a PhD in economics.
That's right. Yes, he's also very well educated,
which is pretty cool.
That is pretty cool.
I'm just saying.
It's a lot of school.
I don't know. People who know stuff, pretty cool. All right. Go on. Sorry, Sophie.
And then Chad Likens is another very progressive candidate. It's interesting. He's actually been campaigning a little bit this spring with Steph Routh, who is a District 1 candidate in East Portland. She's sort of a longtime transportation advocate. I think a lot of people in the progressive world know her, and they've linked arms a little bit and have done some joint appearances. So he's sort of reaching across the district, and not a ton of people are at this point. It's a little kind of premature, it seems like. But he runs a chess club. It's called Rose City Chess, and they put on events, and it seems actually, I mean, I don't know a whole lot about the chess world, but it seems like this chess club is like the predominant one in Portland.
He really seems to have a very honed-in interest in chess.
He is really all about chess.
Wow.
Yes.
Nerd alert. Just kidding. Chad Likens.
He actually doesn't know how to play chess, though.
Shut the...
I'm kidding.
Sophie!
Sorry.
That would have been an amazing fun fact.
So glad you believed me.
This is really crazy. I invite the reporters of our city, and then I believe them. It's really weird. I really should stop doing that. Okay. Well, before we wrap up, who else stands out in this race? Any candidates who haven't yet qualified for, matching funds, but you think are worth a look?
I think one candidate who is going to do really well, very, very well, like I would not be surprised if he was elected, is Eric Zimmerman, who is current chief of staff to Multnomah County Commissioner Julia Brim Edwards. Prior to that, he worked in Mayor Ted Wheeler's office for a number of years. He is also a former veteran, super moderate. I think he's very well liked in political circles, or at least moderate political circles. He is not yet qualified for matching funds, but I think the Portland Metro Chamber is going to swing hard for Eric Zimmerman. And that's another thing that's kind of, if we zoom out a little bit on all 4 districts, the Portland Metro Chamber's PAC that they started, and I think it's called United for Portland, I think they're going to spend a lot of money in District 4. I think they want all 3 seats. And I think they're still kind of figuring out their strategy for the other 3 districts, like how much they actually want to invest in each district, or whether it's just kind of candidate specific. But I think they're going to swing pretty heavy in District 4.
All right. Well, thank you, Sophie, for going through some of the candidates with me in your district, District 4. Are you at all excited with the people that you have to vote for? Are you excited?
That's actually, no, I have actually really not thought at all about who I'm excited for as a voter. And I think that's just because I've been so focused on the election just as a reporter that I honestly, that's the first time I've honestly thought about who I would vote for. I actually haven't considered that yet.
Wow.
I think by the time the election comes around, I probably won't have any difficulty in figuring out who I want to put on my own ballot. But right now I'm just super focused on there's a lot of candidates we got to sort through. And I'm looking at it through very much a reporter's lens versus an individual voter lens, at least in my job capacity, which is probably a good thing.
Yeah. It's probably what you're supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
Well, Sophie, thank you so much for taking the time this morning to hang out with me and going through District 4. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. Thanks, Claudia.
That's all for today here on CityCast Portland. Thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed the show, please share it with a friend, rate or leave us a review. It really does help us out. We'll be back tomorrow morning with more from around the city. Until then, see you at Slim.